the big news that has come out this week, which has been rumored for months, is that LIV Golf, which again, Roman numeral 54, is changing one of its central tenets from 54 holes of competition to 72 holes of
LA Golf, the so-called rebel tour that shook the sport with booming music, shotgun starts, and its wild 54-hole format, has just blown up its own identity. In a twist that stunned both players and critics, the Saudi-backed league announced it is abandoning the very structure that made it famous. Beginning in 2026, every LIV event will expand to 72 holes, essentially mirroring the same traditional format the league once promised to disrupt. And this dramatic shift comes at the very moment LIV is grappling with staggering financial losses of over $1 billion. If you love golf's untold stories and behind-the-scenes drama, make sure you subscribe to Eagle Line Golf. We bring you the inside scoop every week. This move feels like an earthquake for a tour whose entire brand, LIV, Roman numerals for 54, was built around the format it has now thrown out. Since 2022, the 54-hole, 3-day setup was the league's main selling point. It was marketed as fast, fresh, fan-friendly, and a direct alternative to the 4-day PGA grind. Players were drawn in by guaranteed money and lighter schedules. Fans were sold a flashy, modern product. But behind the bright lights and hype, the problems kept piling up. The biggest obstacle was simple: no official world golf ranking points. Without OWGR points, players had no clear path into the 4 major championships that define a career. The OWGR rejected LIV's application partly because its format was too unconventional. And after years of pushing back, while its players slid further down the rankings, the league appears to have finally given in. The announcement that shocked the golf world on November 4, 2025 confirmed that starting in 2026, every event will adopt a 4-day, 72-hole format beginning on Thursdays. And although the team competition, one of LIV's unique features, will remain, the core identity that made the league stand out has essentially vanished. The decision didn't just spark debate, it triggered a storm across the sport. Players who once bragged about the innovative 54-hole model were suddenly forced to defend a tour that just reversed its own mission. Some insiders claimed the change was the only way to stop top talent from leaving, while others whispered that sponsors wanted something more traditional before committing major money. With major pathways closing, big-name stars who accepted massive LIV deals were beginning to feel the pressure. The timing only added to the chaos. On the eve of LIV's most expensive season yet, fans who loved the fast, modern format felt blindsided, wondering whether the league was abandoning its rebellious edge simply to stay afloat. It looked like a tour struggling with identity, relevance, and survival all at once. Behind closed doors, tensions had been growing for months. Major organizers were quietly telling LIV players they needed OWGR points if they wanted guaranteed entry into golf's biggest stages, and that message hit hard. Nobody wanted to watch top talent fade from the rankings simply because their league didn't qualify. When whispers turned to panic, leadership realized time was running out. Team CEOs, financial advisors, and player agents demanded answers. Some argued LIV should double down on disruption, others insisted that embracing tradition was the only option left. The pressure reached a boiling point until the 72-hole shift became the only move that made sense. Yet even with the new format, critics say the change feels more like desperation than evolution. While LIV insists this is a strategic step forward, not everyone is buying the polished PR message. Critics argue it exposes a league that overspent, overpromised, and ultimately failed to break into golf's traditional power structure. Even supportive players quietly admit the league will never feel the same. The music, the chaos, the energy, all of it changes when the tour begins operating just like the system it once claimed to challenge. Meanwhile, PGA loyalists are laughing it off, saying LIV finally realized the old-school model wasn't broken. Supporters counter that the new format could strengthen the league's legitimacy and help retain its star power for years to come. But one thing is certain, this plot twist has reshaped the entire chessboard of professional golf, and no one knows whether LIV is stepping into a comeback, or stumbling into its downfall. This entire shift is clearly aimed at winning over the OWGR committee and finally securing the ranking points LIV has been chasing for years. Without them, even its top stars are fading fast. Take former world number 1 Dustin Johnson, a prime example of how dramatic the decline has become. He has plummeted to 604th in the world rankings, meaning automatic entry into the Masters, US Open, Open Championship, and PGA Championship is no longer guaranteed. The move to 72 holes is a direct gamble, a last-minute attempt to reopen the door to the majors before it shuts completely. But the financial picture behind this decision makes the situation even more intense. Recent filings from LIV Golf's UK branch reveal shocking losses, over $1.1 billion gone since launch, including more than $461 million burned in 2024 alone. Independent financial directors have warned there is material uncertainty about whether the company can remain stable long-term, a polite way of saying the money drain is becoming alarming. Yes, the Saudi Public Investment Fund, worth an estimated $925 billion, has promised to cover the losses. But the real question now is unavoidable: how long are they willing to keep pouring cash into a product that's bleeding this much? Trying to regain control of the conversation, CEO Scott O'Neill recently boasted that LIV secured nearly $500 million in sponsorships over the past year, an impressive claim considering the league began with virtually nothing. But while his statement sounded bold, it didn't erase the massive financial storm brewing behind the scenes. Recent financial filings from LIV Golf's UK branch revealed just how alarming the losses truly are: more than $1.11 billion burned since launch and over $461 million lost in 2024 alone. Independent financial directors even warned there is material uncertainty about the company's long-term stability, a polished way of saying the money drain is becoming dangerous. And even O'Neill's flex couldn't silence the growing doubts. Behind closed doors, insiders whispered that many of those sponsorships were heavily discounted or tied to conditions that haven't fully materialized. Industry analysts questioned whether the deals were meant to boost optics rather than strengthen LIV's financial foundation. With losses rising every year, critics believe the league is trying to buy legitimacy faster than it can earn it. Meanwhile, players are starting to glance over their shoulders, wondering what happens if the financial tide turns. Many stars sign for generational money, but nobody wants to get stuck in a league that might tighten the spending if things get rough. LIV needed a bold, dramatic move to quiet the noise, and switching to a 72-hole format was the loudest play left on the board. But whether the gamble pays off is another matter entirely. Publicly, LIV insists the shift is part of a long-term evolution. Privately, the pressure is intense. Tournament attendance has been inconsistent, TV ratings have struggled to break through, and global broadcasts haven't reached the numbers executives hoped for. On top of that, potential media partners want stability, predictability, and tradition, three things LIV's old format didn't offer. Moving to 72 holes suddenly gives the league a product that's easier to sell to sponsors and networks who understand the rhythm of traditional golf. But it also exposes a difficult truth: the so-called Rebel Tour is slowly reshaping itself to fit into the very system it once promised to overthrow. Players who loved the shorter weeks now face full-length grinds, and fans who admired the chaos and pace are wondering whether the tour is losing its spark. The identity crisis is real, and everyone can feel it. Meanwhile, PGA Tour loyalists are watching the entire shift with a mix of amusement and caution. Some believe LIV's pivot proves the traditional 72-hole format was never the problem, it was how LIV executed its plan. Others see the move as a sign that pressure from majors, the OWGR, and fans is finally forcing LIV to play by long-established rules. But a few insiders warn that this change could actually make the rivalry sharper than ever. If LIV earns more legitimacy in the eyes of governing bodies, its stars could regain access to the majors, instantly shifting the balance of power. Imagine Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau, Dustin Johnson, Cameron Smith, and Jon Rahm storming back into golf's biggest stages with full momentum. That's a nightmare scenario for the PGA Tour's grip on the sport's most important weeks. The stakes are rising, the tension is building, and LIV's 72-hole shift might be the spark that ignites the next chapter of golf's biggest modern war. But even with the sponsorship boost, the fresh wave of revenue is tiny compared to the massive expenses LIV continues to carry. Switching to a traditional format looks like another move to make the league appear steady and legitimate to partners who want something stable, not chaotic. And player reactions show just how divided the golf world has become. Jon Rahm, the reigning individual champion, immediately backed the change, calling it a victory for both players and the league. He said, "We are competitors at heart and want every opportunity to compete at the highest level." The switch to 72 holes is the logical next step that strengthens the competition and tests us more completely. His support carried weight, revealing that some stars welcome longer battles if it means staying relevant on the biggest stages. Dustin Johnson supported the move as well, saying 72 holes simply feels more like the major tournaments everyone grew up watching. He said he has always liked the 4-round grind because it gives elite players more room to rise to the top. For veterans like him, the shift brings LIV closer to the competitive structure they knew on the PGA Tour, increasing their odds at the majors and returning them to a system they understand. But not everyone is convinced. Rory McIlroy, one of LIV's most outspoken critics, called the decision peculiar. He openly questioned whether the format was ever the real reason OWGR shut out LIV. In his words, "I think they could have gotten ranking points with 3 rounds." His comment cast serious doubt on LIV's narrative, suggesting deeper issues at play than just format. McIlroy doubled down, saying he doesn't believe 3 rounds versus 4 was the real obstacle. Instead, he hinted the true problem is LIV's field strength, which continues to weaken as its players slide further down the world rankings. Rory didn't hold back, saying the format switch simply puts LIV back in line with what every other tour already does, stripping away the disruptor image they bragged about from day one. He took another jab at their original mission, raising the core question everyone is whispering: is this change actually solving anything, or is it just a cosmetic upgrade to stay relevant? The entire situation is messy. To many observers, this shift feels like a quiet admission that LIV's original vision didn't land. The whole golf but louder idea slowly morphed into golf but basically the same. Fans and players alike are now trying to figure out whether this transformation is smart strategy or pure survival mode. The Rebel Tour just tossed aside the one thing that made it truly different, hoping the same traditional establishment it once fought would finally grant it legitimacy. Critics say this looks like weakness, a signal that the model could not survive without approval from the OWGR and the majors. Some argue LIV traded its soul just to sit at the very table it once tried to flip over. Even the name LIV now feels like an ironic shadow of a bold experiment that didn't unfold as imagined. But there's another way to look at it. This shift to 72 holes could be a sharp strategic pivot rather than a surrender. LIV's leadership may have realized that the battle with the OWGR was unwinnable under the old format, so they changed course before the entire project collapsed. From this angle, the move looks less like giving up and more like survival instinct. Without OWGR points, LIV's biggest stars were slowly fading from the majors. And once that happened, the league's entire value would collapse, because no one wants a roster of superstars who can't qualify for the biggest tournaments. Adopting the 72-hole format is LIV's attempt to rebuild the bridge it burned at launch. They want the majors to take them seriously, they want the OWGR to stop ignoring them, and they want fans to believe their players still belong among the sport's elite. But even with this shift, nothing is guaranteed. The OWGR could still refuse to award points, leaving LIV players grinding through longer weeks without ranking benefits, sponsors questioning the direction, and fans wondering why the tour abandoned the fast, chaotic format they loved, for nothing. That's a dangerous position. If the OWGR finally approves ranking points, everything changes overnight. LIV's stars would regain access to the majors, the league would earn legitimacy, and the rivalry with the PGA Tour would return to full heavyweight status. That scenario is exactly why LIV made this gamble. The potential upside is massive. But the optics are undeniably messy. A league that built its identity on rebellion is now reshaping itself to fit the same mold it once mocked. The reaction across the golf world reflects just how explosive this shift is. Traditional fans say LIV has finally realized you can't reinvent a sport without respecting its foundation. LIV supporters counter that the tour is leveling up and positioning itself for long-term dominance. Meanwhile, a growing number of observers believe this move is more about panic than power. Inside the league, some players are energized, others are frustrated, and a few are quietly wondering whether this is the first step toward an even larger identity overhaul. The tour that once promised chaos, music, speed, and freedom is suddenly becoming polished, structured, and official, a dramatic transformation for a brand built on breaking rules. With this change, LIV also erased one of the strongest excuses the OWGR had used to deny ranking points, turning the pressure back on the committee. If LIV events now mirror PGA Tour events on paper, what justification remains for saying no? It's a calculated gamble. The familiar format could also make LIV easier to sell to a broader audience and more appealing to sponsors who value stability over unpredictability. This shift might even crack the door open to future reconciliation with the PGA Tour. The two products now look far more alike, perhaps not revolutionary, but more realistic for the long game. Everything now hinges on what happens next, and the OWGR's decision is the first major test. If points finally come through, LIV's move looks like a clear victory. Players climb the rankings again, secure their major spots, and the league gains momentum and credibility. But if the OWGR denies them once more, possibly citing the closed team model or lack of a cut, then the entire switch could be seen as a flop, leaving LIV stripped of its identity and still shut out of golf's biggest stages. As the dust settles, LIV Golf stands at a genuine crossroads. This leap to 72 holes has already changed the league forever. LIV has traded its wild rebel persona for a shot at fitting into the traditional system. It's a risky decision that will shape the tour's entire future. Is this the beginning of a new era, where the league finally earns legitimacy? Or the slow start of its decline, a quiet slide back into the structure it once promised to disrupt? Saudi Arabia's PIF came in with billions and shook the sport to its core, but this moment proves that even limitless money can't skip the traditions and structures that define golf. The next chapters will reveal whether this gamble becomes LIV's breakthrough, or just another twist in an ongoing identity crisis. So what do you think? Is this a smart power move or the beginning of the end for the LIV experiment? If you love the untold stories and raw drama shaking up golf, make sure you hit subscribe. Eagle Line Golf brings you the real inside scoop every single week.